More reaction on this we're now joined by political analyst Sanusha Naidoo, who joins me via Skype from Cape Town. Sanusha, you were listening to Helen Zille. Your takeaways from that conversation I've just had with her.
Good evening, Vio. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear very much of the interview that you did, so I'm going to go blindsided in this and pick up on the questions you asked. I think it was very interesting in the way that she interprets the role of the federal chair in terms of the capacity, the power that that chair brings to the kind of cohesiveness and the governance questions and all kinds of important dynamics that underpin a political party. The fact of the matter is, it is a powerful position to go for because it does determine how you define your role and your level of engagement and constituency base within the party. So I think that's the first thing I feel that by putting your hat in the ring for that position, you're actually indicating not a supportive role, but rather one that you want to be much more in control and in power of what's happening in the party. I think the second point that I picked up on through your questioning was the point about, where is this going? Is this something about the fact that perhaps there's a need to take the party back in some way or form? And I think that kind of, I don't know what her response was, but just from the intimations of your question, I could get the sense that there was definitely a need to say, well, the party has gone into some kind of uncharted territory and space, and we need to get it back. Now, what does this mean? Get it back in a sense of the fact that perhaps the vanguard of the kind of true liberalism of the party has basically faltered and is being undermined, or it hasn't really gone forward in that space, and therefore there's a need to get the party back within that confines. The third point being the question of the relationship between her and the current leader of the DA, Mmusi Maimane. What I could interpret from what was being said by you is the challenge that it's probably broken down into a state where whether it can be repaired or not repaired, I'm not sure. And then this leads to the point of whether he should step down. And again, without hearing what she's saying, I think that the question of, does the buck stop at the leader with regard to the performance of the election, the performance of the party during the 2019 election? He did indicate he's going to take responsibility, but then of course the question is, what about the other individuals in the party who are in the federal exec, etc. What responsibility will they play? And I think the point about race is very critical to the debate because it links to all the other four points that I was talking about, and that is, it comes back to the transformation agenda within the party and what kind of agenda that the party is going to take forward in that space of not just widening the gap of the party in terms of its electoral footprint. We've seen ebbs and flows with by-elections after the 2019 election, but it's also about the fact that they have not essentially transformed the party in the way that perhaps they envisaged they would do, or even how Mmusi could have taken the party forward. And I think it represents the constraints being in a party that is so broad in one way. And I think for me, the question is really not just about, how we're going to basically go out into the electoral landscape and change all of this. It has to start from within. And the last point I think would be very important to raise, and that comes back to how she will work with Mmusi if he's re-elected. But it also is a question of, the kind of firepower that perhaps she has to make such a big decision after saying she needs to get back into the public policy space, needs to develop all of these narratives and writings, etc. Given a tumultuous relationship with the party under Mmusi Maimane, in particular the fact, as you said, she's a firebrand, she doesn't hold back, she makes her messages, she says what she wants to say, and that's it. Whether or not this is the first start of that process where she will, whether if she wins, let's not jump to conclusions, whether if she wins, how that will play out in terms of the backing she has and the backing Mmusi has. And of course, let's not forget patrons and benefactors and funding. These are all critical spaces. So to make this decision now and to decide I'm going to leave my position as fellow at the Institute for Race Relations is a big thing that perhaps Helen wants to basically now put into the space. Ms. Zille wants to put into the space a legacy that she probably feels she didn't leave, given the constraints and all of the turmoilness that she faced in the party.
Now, she insists she holds no grudges. But do you really think that she has it in her to actually step back and be this facilitator or neutral person who looks at the sort of greater good and who cares about the future of this party and won't take sides or won't enter the petty politics of the party?
My counter question would be to her is, how can you not, given the profile of that position, unless of course they've come to some kind of internal consultation outcome where that position is not going to have the kind of lever that it normally has or has had. And I think that, for me, is going to be the big question. How can you not get caught up in these spaces? Because you are going to have to also get into the nitty-gritty of putting out the fires within the party. And at times, I think Helen has a kind of erred on the other side. I mean, just take the point you raised about the article that was circulating by, I think it was one of the IRR analysts or researchers talking about a possible transformation around a new leader coming into the party. And of course, the name Alan Winde came up. I mean, that doesn't happen just by accident. And I think these are definite signs that we have to start watching in terms of what's going on in the DA, in terms of who is in different camps. And in that way, can she remain insulated from this? I highly doubt it, because when you know the nature of political parties, you know what's at stake, you know how these things are playing itself out, then of course it's difficult to remain in a neutral corner. Yes, that's ideally the role you should be playing in that position. But it's also a very powerful position. And I think given the way in which she has lent her voice to certain issues, the way she's come out as well, responding to that article, I think you can't separate these things. So I think it will be very important for us to watch that space.
Assuming she's the strongest candidate and she indeed wins, what will that mean for Mmusi Maimane, and how do you think Mmusi Maimane should then, handle things from then on?
Well, I think up to now, and given the fact that the Internal Audit Committee of the party has exonerated him in terms of these allegations around the car and the house and so forth, I think he still has a difficult terrain to navigate within the DA, particularly because I think that the chips are really down. It's become almost chronic in the sense of how these different divisions are playing itself out. We saw the whip of the DA in Parliament saying that he opposed and he reiterated the issues around this question of Alan Winde and transformation and a new leader, not transformation, rather, correct myself, on the new leader coming in. And I think these are going to be difficult spaces. And I think this is where how Mmusi has constructed his power base within the party after the election, even though people may say he's still there, he has certain constituencies that are backing him. I think it's also about the fact that there are other constituencies who may be having the kind of resources that Mmusi may not be able to collate, or he may have to basically go much deeper than that. And so I think this is going to be a difficult situation. And of course, if indeed the relationship between him and Helen has not necessarily been one in the last couple of months or in the last 24 months, hasn't been one of being able to reconcile differences, then it's going to play itself out. And I think under his watch as well, when he had to deal with sanctioning Helen over the tweets, etc., it does create a bit of a backlash. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
Sanusha Naidoo, thank you very much for your time and insights this evening. And still to come on Nightline, we get your reaction from one of the unions on the SABC bailout.